Sunrise Extra Wednesday edition. Big story that is getting a lot of play on our Facebook page and kgw.com is a controversial one. It's out of campus. The principal there on administrative leave this morning, not on campus for her first day, because of a post that she made on her Facebook page the day that Kobe Bryant was killed in that helicopter crash with 8 other people. So we want to show you that post. And she says, "Not gonna lie, seems to me that karma caught up with a racist today."
A rapist.
A rapist today. That post was up on her personal Facebook page for about an hour before she deleted it. Before she deleted it, someone took a screenshot and shared it. It's been seen by many students and parents who are very upset now.
Right.
The school district is investigating. She is on leave. She has since sent a letter to parents and staff apologizing, and she apologized to us on camera yesterday. Take a listen to this.
Most definitely a learning experience. As a career educator, only adult job I've had, 22 years, we try and teach kids to think before they act, think before they speak, think before they post. I clearly didn't in this situation.
Since sent a letter. Okay, so that was the principal yesterday on campus. We posted on our Facebook page a question. Should your social media posts affect your job? And we've gotten about 63 comments so far, and some really good, actual constructive debate going on. That doesn't happen very often on social media, right? But
do you want to start with a couple and just kind of give us a little flavor?
I think, let me refresh this page so I'm matching.
As you do that, I will say, you know, I have a pretty hard stance on this one, but it is really great to see other people responding, even to the other side of the fence, because they're bringing up points that I hadn't thought of in regards to this teacher's comment. But we'll get to that in a moment. What do you have for us?
Yeah, so Jackie says free speech is not free from consequences. It's not illegal for her to say what she wants, but there are still consequences, and a lot of people kind of echoing that. Eric says she made a mistake. She has apologized and has tried to make this into a teachable moment for the students. Since when does one mistake, especially one that doesn't physically hurt anyone and isn't part of official business, mean you automatically lose your job? Again, she has not lost her job. She is on paid leave while they investigate. Pat Harrington says, no, your social post shouldn't affect you. You should be able to voice your personal view on your own time. Michael says social media is the escape hatch of opinions you should just keep to yourself. For some reason, people feel it's okay to say anything on here without any repercussions. Nope, if you say it out loud, then you own it and you have to deal with it. There is nothing private about social media. Is there one more we can share? Tracy says, I personally don't say where I work on my Facebook page. Therefore, if I say something, it's not reflective of where I work. People are allowed freedom of speech and are entitled to their own opinions. Well, maybe not appropriate. She is entitled to state it. There are 50 posts on my feed in the last 24 hours I find inappropriate, but the posters are entitled to their own opinions. Please join in on the live conversation. Write a message. We're watching you on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Should your social media posts affect your job? We've reported on several stories where it has.
First post that I noticed on our live feed right now on the Facebook one, because you can be watching us on YouTube or Facebook. Jeff Lucas on Facebook says, of course, the answer to this question is depends on the post and the job, which is something that I thought, you know what, I'm not sure if it does. Honestly, I'm starting to think of what is the job where it doesn't matter. Because I feel like wherever you work, I always believe wherever you work, you represent that place of work when you're out in public. If people know you work there.
But there is a different, I mean, I've had one job in my life where I was a more or less a factory employee, payroll number 370136.
Okay.
And, you know, just people scrolling through that, there's a difference between that, I think, and probably what slides under the radar versus being, in this case, a job, in this particular public eye job, it was a principal. Or my job right now, being on air. I think I am held to a higher standard right now, absolutely, than when I was payroll number 360176 for this large company.
I guess the exception would be some unknown company that people don't know about.
Well, this was a well-known company, but nobody is it was when I worked for TWA, Trans World Airlines.
Okay.
But nobody's flipping through the well, for starters, not that many people know who I am.
I don't think that's the point.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree on that one.
I think if you had 50 people following you and they knew that you worked for TWA, then they're like, hey, you know, he works for TWA.
But nobody's calling the CEO of TWA, I guarantee, and going, you got a flight attendant in St. Louis, Missouri that said this.
What if your supervisor had seen something? I mean, I think it's just social media is not private anymore.
No, it's not.
Out there. And you have to assume,
Right.
think about the person you wouldn't want to see it the most seeing it, because it's going to happen.
Right, and so
What's
I think
their
it
reaction?
depends on the company. Because there may be some out there that said, you know, our employees can do whatever they want, say whatever they want. That is the determining factor, because the opposite is true. A lot of them do care, and there's public pressure, and especially when it's a governmental public agency like a public high school, you know that they are going to be sensitive to those things. They're going to be influenced by the people who are on campus, and so it's a...
I guess what I was trying to say is, and maybe you still disagree, Drew, but I feel like my position right now, I'm held at a higher standard than other jobs that I've had. And I guess that's what I was getting.
I agree with that. I thought about the same thing. I am held to a higher standard now than when I delivered the newspaper for the Philadelphia Daily News. I had like 30 papers on my route, honestly. But if I was to post on my social media page, and people go, oh, that's the paper boy for the Daily News, like that to me reflects on them some way, somehow.
Yeah, I get it.
And even I don't want to get we're getting way off the topic of this woman's post, but even you're
think
saying, if an employer says, I would love to see the employer who comes out and says, our employees are allowed to do and say what they want on their free time. They're allowed to do that. And I would love to see that employer's reaction if one of their employees was on social media and said something inappropriate about that employer's wife or children or something along those lines. Like, oh, wait a minute, changed my mind. I didn't know you were going to do that on social media. You know what I mean? I feel like that's a really harsh stance to take.
Even the ones, let's just say for the sake of the argument, that the employer didn't care. And I'm your employer, I'm going to let you say whatever you want because you don't have a big job and nobody knows who you are. The minute somebody else picks that up, they'll start putting pressure on the employer. And even if the employer doesn't like it or doesn't care, they won't let that go if there's enough customer pressure. So I feel like any way you go, it always kind of bounces back. Somebody's going to be offended. Who was it here said, I feel it, Susan Osborne Jaggers, sure makes you wonder if you have any rights anymore. That was her comment on our live Facebook
And a lot
stream.
of people having this debate about, you know, free speech. Yes, it is free speech. A lot of people pointing out, just like Brenda Venz Owens on Facebook, or I'm sorry, Jackie on Facebook, saying, yeah, legally, we can write anything we want because it is, you know, free speech. But that doesn't mean there aren't consequences.
I never understood that argument, to be honest with you, and maybe I need a refresher course because...
it's not illegal, what she wrote, you know, it's completely legal.
Polani, I believe it's Polani, watching us on Facebook, fired up about this. What the blank is going on with people? Have they just gone mad, forgotten about those little words, and then in bold letters she screams out, freedom of speech. This blank is put out of hand when people can't speak their mind without being fired or the chance of losing their jobs. And I say there is such a thing as freedom of speech.
I guess you could have a legal case, you know, like if you were fired and then you say, hey, this is just... I mean, you know, it's not a criminal...
She's probably a contracted employee that probably has some clause, like most staff on air here, that say, they let you know, you represent this company, so tread lightly.
Right.
Yeah, you're not going to jail and you're not being fined, but there are, business consequences.
Companies have the right to have their own policies too, though. I mean, that's kind of just as much of a right for that company as the free speech is and our constitutional rights.
There's no...
You don't have a right. You don't have a right to... Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I was thinking about this for a second, and I'm already talking before I'm actually thinking. Right? But I do have a right to a job. Do you have your right to your job? Do you have your right to your job?
Well, I told my boss that once, and he disagreed.
And you no longer work there. No, but I mean, I don't know.
That freedom of speech line, though,
Well,
sometimes
your job is not a right. I mean, You know what I mean? Like, you're
I consider it a privilege.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
But then you
like,
get into...
they don't have to hire you, and they don't have to keep you if you're not following the policy.
But there are discriminatory rules where they can be held liable because you can make a case that you didn't hire this person because of XYZ, and XYZ can be against the law.
It's true. Andrea
Interesting
Mulgard
conversation.
on our Facebook feed says, of course, personal conduct should affect employment. You know that judging people based on their choices is the opposite of discrimination, right?
You know, getting back to this specific comment,
interesting.
She referenced Kobe Bryant being a rapist on this Facebook post, this Camas High School principal. And the fact of the matter is, I heard a couple of people make that same sort of remark in the hours and the days right after Kobe's death. And it made me cringe a little bit, because I felt like it was too soon to bring up something like that from the past that was 20 years ago in the wake of the man's death. But I heard it, to quite honestly, I heard it from someone here at work. The very next morning when we came into work at 4 o'clock, and this person he wasn't trying to be funny, wasn't trying to be controversial, just said it to me.
Not a news person.
Not a news person.
Not a weather person.
Not a weather person, but he works here. And just said, hey, how come no one's talking about that part of his life? I'm going, well, because I think it was 20 years ago and it's too soon after the man's death, would be my, my opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, I get the sensitivity of it, but it is a fact.
Right.
It is a fact that they settled out of court, that he made it quite an extraordinary statement at the time, saying, I believed it was consensual, but I understand why she did not. And it was quite lengthy. You don't usually hear something like that in a settlement. But I heard more than a couple. I mean, I read. I mean, that was a major point for a lot of people. They were like, they felt that the tribute was, I guess, in their opinion, unjustified because of what had happened.
There's an LA Times article out this morning, and now it's behind a paywall that I can't see, but it was all about today. There's a growing, these kinds of social media posts, not saying he deserved to die in the helicopter crash because of the rape allegations, but saying survivors of domestic abuse or sexual abuse feel like this whole thing is being left out of the Kobe story, and we're, keeping it down, and that kind of brings back bad memories for a lot of people.
Right.
That said, that's a whole, issue that's wonderful to talk about, and let's talk about it. Going on, an hour after you found out that this person has been killed in a car crash, and saying he deserved it is quite another thing, right, for a principal. But I thought, to her credit, I thought her statement to us that we played you was very well said. And you don't often hear a lot of people who make a mistake or just own up to it in such a open and honest way, and explaining why. She says, I've been an educator all my life, and we teach kids, and I teach kids, think before you do something, think before you say something. And she said, I didn't do that in this case. I was too quick to go on there. I didn't think about what I was writing, and I just put it out there. And to her credit, that you don't often see people kind of just saying, hey, I messed up, I own up to it.
No, that's true, and it kind of leads me to, go down a different rabbit hole of she didn't commit a crime. She says she made a mistake. And so anybody who would want to blackball somebody permanently or take away their job permanently because of a mistake, that does make me wonder. There are things that, look at all the Me Too stuff, and there's such a wide range. It doesn't have to be a rape allegation. It could be a sexual harassment. It could be saying something to somebody in a work setting. Does that person deserve never to be back into society? I mean, you talk about the cancel culture and that type of thing. It's like that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But then on the flip side, you also have the deal, the American people are kind of funny, they decide to love someone, they decide to not like someone.
Right.
And for the most part, when they decide to love someone, that person, and I'm speaking in just a broad generalization.
Sure.
But when they decide to love you, a politician, a public figure, what have you, that person can do a lot of things, and the good faith that people have, just let it slide. On the opposite side of the coin, I've seen people just make one little mistake, and for whatever reason, the American public decides to vilify that person for the rest of their life. Now, obviously, with Mr. Bryant, we're talking about someone who was very much beloved by a lot of people. who, you know, to your recollection of what he said after the event with the woman, did something that perhaps looking back he regretted.
Yep. It's tough. You know, I am definitely one who jumps to conclusions or reacts to something emotionally the first time I read it. Like I see something, I let my emotions sort of get the best of me, and I sometimes will rush to judgment. Because when I see that post, I go, oh my gosh, like a principal posted that? She's in charge of young children? Man, how irresponsible is that post? That's the same thing you tell kids not to do, and she's doing it. My goodness, she shouldn't have that job. I mean, those thoughts all came flooding through my head, and now I'm sharing them out loud. You know, this is all, again, before really thinking about it. Then I see her apology, and I go, my goodness, that is a really well put an apology. And based on, now I see the post, now I hear the apology, with both of those in front of me, I go, I don't want to see her lose her job, because I feel like she honestly recognized there was a mistake made, and she's truly sorry for it. And we should give people second chances. I do believe in that. I do believe in second chances. I think maybe Kobe Bryant got a second chance, right? I feel like his wife gave him one. I don't know that man's story, to be honest with you, well enough to know if he really changed his ways or if he had ways to be changed. Yeah. But I know that his wife obviously decided, I'm going to let you stick around for 20 years and make a family with you and raise children with you. And I said, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and assume that he's doing right by her and his family at this point. He was forgiven by her, and he went on to have a happy family life. This woman owned up to her mistake immediately, right? Didn't waste any time. Got right out there in front of it, owned it, apologized for it, and I feel like while it was a bad mistake on her part, I'm ready to forgive her.
Emotions can make you do things in a split second. I think this was one of those moments.
Do we get an emotional do we get latitude for an emotional reaction?
It depends.
Why don't we? Why? Because we all have emotions.
Be there forever. You know?
mean, because this is just another way of like saying you can't have emotions. Well, that's just saying you can't be human.
Well, if your emotions drive you to stick a knife through my heart and kill me, I probably won't.
Well, that's
that,
okay.
Honestly, you know
so that's yeah, that's not good.
Sometimes it's not forgivable.
Yeah.
It's like when you get in a fight with someone or your spouse or whatever. You know, like sometimes it really does benefit from just being like, okay, I'm going to go in this room and just chill for a second, and then you can, you know, before you say something that you don't want to say or you don't mean that you say quickly, and it's just like before you hit that button return on your computer, like that's what they kind of
think before send.
We learn here in the newsroom, like you know. Besides looking for typos and all that stuff, when we post something, it's like, okay, think about what you're about to send and what you're about to say to, you know, someone you may love if it's something hurtful or whatever. On Twitter, Bruce is watching us. Hello, Bruce. Good morning. He says, yes, she should not have said something like that. People take free speech to new levels just to say anything. People need to grow up. Thank you, Bruce, for weighing in. I appreciate that.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, this will be an interesting story. I don't know how long these investigations take, when we'll hear, you know, what the final outcome is with Camas High School.
What is to investigate, by the way? I think this is a dumb question. What is there to investigate?
Look through
this person said this. I think they're evaluating how they feel about it and going through their policies and and studying legalese, right? There's really not a whole lot of
So Sasha Farrell, good morning, said she should not have been put on administrative leave. And then right after that, you poor guy, Richard Vargo said, so the principal is asking for forgiveness on her mistake, yet not willing to acknowledge that Kobe admitted to his allegation. Well, he didn't exactly admit to it, and changed his behavior. He said he never admitted to raping her, but he did apologize.
I don't know if this was brought up, but in response to what you were saying earlier, Chris, Christine Lewis mentioning that you do not have a right to your job, at least not in Oregon, because Oregon is not a right to work state. Maybe we.
Well, but does that get into, like, I think that's more nuts and bolts of like union versus non-union positions or something. Is it? I could be way off on that, but I think that's kind of a. Maybe I didn't represent.
May speak a lot.
Like, what she means is.
Yeah, I just, you know, I mean, I'm the person.
You gotta follow the rules if you want the job there.
I ban people, even people that I know, if they're just using profanity way too often in their comments, be it political or whatever. It's just like there's some things I just don't want to see.
You don't have time.
And that doesn't mean I dislike you as a person. I just don't want to read that every day. fan.
Yeah.
I think you would describe, Rod, our society these days as a snowflake society. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you say that sometimes we are overly sensitive as
I like
a
the
population?
weather metaphor.
Because Theodore, I know who does believe that. Theodore, watching right now on the Facebook Live feed. Theodore, Christopher, Austin, good morning to you, my friend. Says, not a mistake to speak your mind. What law was broken here? Then says, we are a snowflake society. Says, this was a little harsh on the part of the principal, but she also had a point, according to Theodore.
Well, it's not illegal. It's definitely not. She's not she's not charged with anything. She's not in violation. She's not fined. It's just policy and, what kind of the school board and probably the parents think about
different jobs hold us to higher standards than others. I think that's a fair statement. And obviously, if you're a principal of a school, your standard is pretty high.
No,
be it right or wrong,
it is.
It's pretty high.
So Rob St. Helen, one of our regulars, good morning, Rob, says, I am more upset that it was all about Kobe and his daughter. Sad, yes, of course, but there are 7 or 8 other people who lost their lives that hardly got mentioned. That was one of the criticisms of media coverage that I have heard a lot. People did not like the fact that it was about Kobe and Gigi, his daughter.
And 7 others.
Yes, and 7 others. That was another thing. And then the rape allegation against Kobe, there are other people who think that should be included.
Chris, was it you who was saying you have a bunch of friends in California who were saying, who was that? That there has been a lot of coverage about the other families in California specifically?
That's
no,
right.
I don't.
They were
Brian, it was our director, Brian, who said
they were mentioned at the game.
At the Laker game.
That's a tough one. I'm not going to dive too deep into that subject, but it is tough because the fact of the matter is we talk about the people we know in general. I mean,
that's true.
News stories. If someone gets hit by a car this morning in Southeast Portland, we will mention it this morning if that person was to get seriously hurt or injured. But then tomorrow, we're probably not talking about it anymore because we don't know the person. But if it's the mayor of Portland that gets hit by the car, obviously we're going to talk about it tomorrow and Wednesday and how's he doing on Thursday. And,
because of the implications, to a woman.
And I mentioned the mayor, but it could have been anyone that we know. I mean, you just kind of follow the story for someone that you know because you have an interest because you've already had an interest in that person.
It's that person's social impact.
Right. But I also respect and I feel that news coverage has changed a little bit, right? I do feel like anymore, whenever we bring up the story, we do at least mention that there were other people on the helicopter, which that should always be mentioned. I mean, there were lives with an S lost that morning.
So Teresa Smith is weighing in on this whole thing on our Facebook stream, and she says posting should not matter unless you are complaining about the business on social media. Never post online about someone who can read it. Duh. So,
it just depends on the post. If it's could be perceived as racist, if it could perceived as whatever. And I mean it's a central thing in this Jeremy Christian trial, the Max stabbing strain of was he spouting free speech like his side is arguing, and both sides do say he was the first person to physically touch the victims who were stabbed. He was the first person to push them, but the defense is arguing that he was provoked by them getting in his face. He was standing in front of his seat, they were in the aisle, and blah, 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 and he was just saying free speech. It's an interesting, what can you say, and what's the reaction to it?
We're about to break away, so I guess now is not the time to bring up a whole new different I do like to rattle Rod Hill sometimes, or at least stir that pot.
Oh my gosh.
I like to stir it. I was just curious. Do you think the engineer that no one knows, the engineer that works here, any of our engineers behind the scenes that no one knows, should be held to a different standard than you, one of the faces of the station that is seen every morning on our Sunrise show?
I think that I should be, me, myself, my position is, and probably should be held to a higher standard, yes.
Well, the engineers would be happy to know that I think they should be held to the same standard as you. Only because, you know what? Maybe they're not as well known by everyone that watches.
They didn't post it online.
But they still work with vendors that work with the station, and they still represent the station maybe to a smaller scale of people. To me,
hang on.
You were always representing your employer.
He had a discussion. He had a discussion. It was an insightful, differing, or offered up an opinion and something to think about. This was not like,
and it was
I believe this, and
like,
it wasn't like
being brought up.
You think I'm talking about someone specific here? I was totally. I'll bring up someone in our sales department.
Well, no. Well, I remember because I heard the discussion, so that's why
I was literally trying to find a department that no one would really focus on. Let me change
But
this.
it could've been
Someone in our
Andrew.
sales
It's a
department.
reality,
I wasn't
though.
talking about a specific incident.
You know?
Okay,
I get what
well,
you're saying, but yeah, it wasn't. He didn't post it online.
We
He
also-
was asking the question: Was
wasn't
the
even
rape
talking about
allegation
that
brought
in
up in the news
specific
story? Well, I'm
instance.
talking about.
All right.
Just
You
to
talk
defend-
about it, Nina.
Yeah.
You've been referencing it the whole stream here, so.
Brought that up 15 minutes ago.
Oh,
Let's get
that
back
was
to
so.
National Weather Person's Day. You think it should be a huge holiday?
Yes. Now bring me some cookies.